Hey, and welcome to The Working Gal. Our mission, to inspire all the working gals around the world and motivate them to build the professional and personal life they want. Hey everyone, welcome back to The Working Gal. So today we need to talk about something that I know is really hard for a lot of us, and honestly, it's something I'm still working on myself, and that is called boundaries at work. You've probably noticed that the word boundaries has been everywhere lately, something like the buzzword of 2025, right? Everyone's talking about boundaries. But there is an important distinction. Talking about boundaries and actually setting boundaries are two very different things. Because let me ask you this. Have you ever found yourself answering work emails at 10 p.m.? Or saying yes to taking on another project when your projects are piling up without progress? Or staying late again because you don't want to be the first person to leave? Or feeling guilty about taking your lunch break because everyone else is eating at their desk? Yep, me too. And if you're nodding along right now, this video is for you. My hard lesson was that, honestly, the lack of boundaries doesn't make you a good employee. It doesn't make you more valuable, and surely it doesn't make you indispensable. What the lack of boundaries actually makes you is burnt out, resentful, and probably not doing your best work anyway because you're running on empty. And this why today we're going to talk about why boundary setting feels so impossibly hard, especially for women. What is the actual cost of having no boundaries? And most importantly, how to set them without feeling like a terrible person. Because guilt is actually the real issue here, right? Okay, so first we need to talk about why this feels so hard. Because I think sometimes we beat ourselves up for struggling with boundaries, like, why can't I just say no? What's wrong with me? But there's actually a lot going on here psychologically and culturally. First of all, and I've said that before, women are socialized from a very young age to be accommodating, to be helpful, to be nice, to not make waves, to prioritize other people's needs over our own. And that's not your fault, by the way. That's the water we've been swimming in our whole lives. So, when you're at work and your boss asks you to take on one more thing, or a colleague asks for help, or you're expected to stay late, saying no feels like you're violating some fundamental rule about who you're supposed to be. It feels selfish. It feels mean. It feels like you're letting people down. And then there's the fear factor. Like, okay, real talk, a lot of us are afraid that if we set boundaries, there will be consequences. Maybe our boss will think we're not committed. Maybe we won't get that promotion. Maybe we'll be seen as difficult or not a team player. And the truth is that in some toxic work environments, those fears are actually valid, which makes this even harder. I remember when I was working at my last job, actually, maybe it was 2 jobs ago. Anyway, I was so afraid of seeming like I wasn't committed that I would literally answer Slack messages within minutes, no matter what time it was. And I'm talking about crazy hours like weekends, midnight didn't matter. And I thought that made me look dedicated. Little did I know. You know what it actually did? It trained everyone to expect that I would always be available. I basically set the precedent that I had no boundaries. And then when I tried to pull back, it was even harder because I'd already established this pattern. So there's socialization, there's fear, and then there's also this thing that I think doesn't get talked about enough, which is that a lot of us tie our self-worth to being needed, to being helpful, to being the person who always says yes. And if we start saying no, we have to confront this uncomfortable question of, who am I if I'm not constantly giving? And that's deep stuff, right? That's usually things we discuss in therapy, but it's real. And it's part of why boundaries feel so hard. All right, so let's talk about what happens when you don't set boundaries. Because I think sometimes we think, oh, it's fine, I can handle it, I'll just push through. But can you really? First of all, burnout. And I'm not talking about that trendy, I need a vacation burnout. I'm talking about the kind of burnout where you wake up and you have no energy, no motivation, no joy. You're just going through the motions. You're exhausted in your bones, that kind of burnout. And burnout isn't just being tired, it's a state of chronic stress that actually affects your physical health. Like studies show that chronic work stress can lead to cardiovascular problems, a weakened immune system, anxiety, depression. It's not just, oh, I'm stressed, it's serious. The second cost is resentment. And oh my God, this one is sneaky. Because at first, when you're saying yes to everything and staying late and taking on extra work, you might feel okay about it. You might even feel good, like, look at me, I'm so helpful, I'm such a team player. But over time, that turns into resentment. You start resenting your boss for asking so much of you. You start resenting your colleagues for not pulling their weight. You start resenting yourself for not speaking up. And resentment is toxic. It poisons everything. And eventually, it makes you hate your job, even if you used to love it. At some point, I went through a phase where I was so resentful that I would literally sit at my desk fuming about all the things people were asking me to do. And the worst part, no one even knew I was upset because I kept saying yes. I was creating my own prison and then being angry about it, which brings me to the third cost. The third cost is that you lose yourself. When you have no boundaries, you're basically telling the world, my needs don't matter, my time doesn't matter, I don't matter. And eventually, you start to believe that. You lose touch with what you actually want, what you need, what brings you joy, because you're so busy attending to everyone else. And here's something that really hit me when I was thinking about this. When you have no boundaries, you're not actually serving anyone well. Not your employer, not your colleagues, not yourself. Because you're running on empty, you're stressed, you're resentful, you're probably making mistakes, and that's not good for anyone. So the cost of no boundaries is actually really high, and at the end of the day, it's just not sustainable. To get more practical here, let's talk about the different types of boundaries you need at work, because I think sometimes we think boundaries are just about saying no, but it's actually more nuanced than that. First boundary, time boundaries. This is about when you work and when you don't. It's about not checking email after a certain time. It's about not working on weekends unless it's truly an emergency. It's about protecting your non work hours so you can actually rest and recharge. For me, I had to set a hard boundary of no work email after 8 p.m. And at first, I cannot describe how anxious I felt about it. Like, what if someone needs me? What if something urgent comes up? But you know what? Nothing catastrophic happened. The world kept turning, and I started sleeping better because I wasn't lying in bed thinking about work. The second and very important boundary is about your workload, aka how much work you're willing to take on. It's about saying, I'm at capacity right now, I can't take on another project, or I can do this, but then I need to deprioritize something else. And this one is hard because there's always more work to be done, right? There's always another email, another meeting, another task. But you have to recognize that your capacity is limited and that you're not a machine. And taking on more than you can handle doesn't help anyone. The third boundary is related to communication, which means how and when people can reach you. Maybe you turn off Slack notifications after work hours. Maybe you set expectations about response times. Maybe you don't give out your personal cell phone number. For instance, when a colleague keeps texting you at all hours with random questions, just tell them, hey, can we keep work communication to email during work hours? My phone is for personal stuff outside of work. Do it, even if it's scary to say that, because it's absolutely necessary. And now to an equally important boundary, aka emotional boundaries. This is about not taking on other people's stress or drama. It's about not feeling responsible for fixing everyone's problems. It's about maintaining some professional distance so that work stress doesn't completely consume you. For instance, if your boss is stressed and taking it out on everyone, that's not your emotional burden to carry. You can have empathy without absorbing their stress. You can be supportive without making their problems your problems. And fifth, energy boundaries, meaning protecting your energy for the things and people that matter, whether it's saying no to meetings that could be emails or declining social events at work that drain you. It's about recognizing that your energy is valuable and you get to choose where it goes. Now, you are probably wondering how to actually set these boundaries without feeling like the worst person ever. The easy part is listening to me, the hard part is actually doing it. So, first thing, you have to get clear on what your boundaries are. You can't communicate something if you don't know what it is. So, sit down and think about it. What are your non negotiables? What are you willing to be flexible on? What are your limits? For example, maybe your boundary is that you don't work weekends except in genuine emergencies, or you don't answer emails after 7 p.m., or you take your full lunch break every day. Whatever it is, name it, write it down, get clear. The second step is to communicate your boundaries clearly and calmly, avoiding any drama or pushback. And to be fair and square, you don't need to apologize for having boundaries. You don't need to over explain or justify to state it clearly. So instead of saying, I'm so sorry, I know this is probably really inconvenient, but I can't really take on this project right now because I'm kind of overwhelmed, you say, I'm at capacity with my current projects. I won't be able to take this on without deprioritizing something else. Which would you like me to prioritize? See the difference? One is apologetic and wishy washy, the other is clear and professional. And I'm not saying it's easy to do that, especially at first. But the more you practice direct communication, the easier it gets. Third, be consistent. Consistency is key when setting boundaries. If you set a boundary but then you keep making exceptions, people learn that your boundary isn't really a boundary. It's more like a suggestion. So, if you say you don't work weekends, then don't answer emails on Saturday. If you say you're at capacity, don't take on that extra project just because you feel bad. Consistency is what makes boundaries stick, and yes, there will be times when you need to make exceptions for true emergencies, but most things that feel urgent aren't actually emergencies. Most things can wait until Monday. Fourth, deal with the guilt, because oh my God, the guilt is real. When you first start setting boundaries, you're probably going to feel terrible. You're going to feel selfish, like you're letting people down. But here's what I want you to remember. That guilt is just your conditioning. It's not the truth. Setting boundaries doesn't make you selfish. It makes you sustainable, and you can't pour from an empty cup. I know that's such a cliche, but it's true. And when the guilt comes up, acknowledge it and say to yourself, okay, I'm feeling guilty right now, and that's normal. That's my people pleasing conditioning. And then remind yourself why you're setting this boundary. Remind yourself that taking care of yourself isn't selfish, it's necessary. And fifth, Be prepared for pushback because not everyone is going to be thrilled about your boundaries. Some people might push back, they might say you're not being a team player, they might act disappointed or frustrated, and that's okay. That's not your problem to fix. If someone has an issue with your reasonable boundaries, that's a them problem, not a you problem. Your job is not to manage other people's reactions to your boundaries. Now, if you work in a truly toxic environment where setting boundaries could genuinely jeopardize your job, that's a different conversation. That might be a sign that you need to start looking for a healthier workplace. But in most cases, reasonable boundaries are respected once you establish them consistently. If you don't know how to start, and it's normal if you are not used to setting your boundaries, I'm going to give you some scripts for common boundary setting scenarios. Because sometimes the hardest part is knowing what to actually say. Scenario 1, your boss asks you to take on another project when you're already overwhelmed. What you say: I want to help with this, but I'm currently focused on X, Y, and Z. If I take this on, something else will need to be deprioritized. Which of these projects would you like me to move down the priority list? This is great because you're not just saying no, you're being solution oriented and you're putting the decision back on your boss about priorities. Scenario 2, a colleague keeps messaging you after work hours. What you say: Hey, I try to unplug after 6 p.m. to recharge for the next day. For anything that comes up after hours, can you send me an email and I'll get back to you first thing in the morning? Clear, direct, gives them an alternative. Scenario 3, you're expected to work late, but you have plans. What you say: I have a commitment this evening that I can't move. I can stay until 6 p.m. to wrap up anything urgent, but I'll need to pick this up again tomorrow morning. You don't need to explain what the commitment is, by the way. It could be a doctor's appointment, or it could be watching Netflix on your couch. Both are valid. Scenario 4, someone asks you to cover their work or help with their project. What you say: I don't have the bandwidth to take that on right now, but I can point you to some resources that might help. Or, I can't help with the whole project, but I could spare 20 minutes to give you feedback on your approach. This way, you're acknowledging their request without taking on their work. Scenario 5, you need to take a sick day or mental health day, but you feel guilty. What you say: I'm not feeling well and need to take a sick day today. I'll be back tomorrow and we'll catch up on anything urgent then. That's it. You don't need to prove how sick you are or to apologize. Just state it and take care of yourself. These scripts might feel a little stiff or formal at first, but the more you use them, the more natural they'll feel, and you can adjust the language to match your style. The important part is the structure: clear, direct, no apologizing. Okay, so you've set your boundaries, you've communicated them. How do you maintain them? Well, first, monitor yourself and check how much you are honoring your boundaries and acknowledge whether you are slipping back into old patterns. For instance, are you still saying yes when you want to say no? Also, make sure to surround yourself with people who, in general, respect boundaries and spend time with them because their example will reinforce your own commitment to boundaries. Of course, don't forget to practice because boundaries are like a muscle, and the more you use them, the stronger they get. And believe me, once you've been living with boundaries for a while, you're not going to want to go back because you will realize how much better life is when you're not constantly overwhelmed and resentful, and you're going to wonder why you didn't do this sooner. Setting boundaries doesn't make you difficult, selfish, or less valuable. On the contrary, boundaries make you sustainable and make you someone who can show up fully for your work without sacrificing everything else in your life. So, if right now you're at a point where you answer emails at 10 p.m. or skip lunch or say yes to everything, I want you to know that you can totally change this, even if it feels uncomfortable at first. But that discomfort is temporary, burnout is not. In the description below, you will find some useful resources to explore more about boundaries and how to say no. Thank you so much for watching, and don't forget to protect your peace, okay? You're worth it. Bye, and see you next week.